Waking Up From Work podcast. My name's Dave Swillum. Let's get ready to hustle.
Welcome back to the Waking Up From Work podcast. You're listening to episode 84 tonight of the podcast. This is your host, Dave Swillum. Again, I still say that in case people are tuning in. If they don't know who I am, they know the name, but a bunch of you have hung out for a long time, and I really appreciate it. This is where we get to work, making work a passion, living creative full-time. We talk to musicians, entrepreneurs, small businesses, creatives, artists, and every single type of people that are living creative full-time, doing what they want to do. And today is going to be a solo episode. So I'm going to warn people a little bit. This whole month of November, a lot of the people that I have as guests coming on can't do Thursday nights. Like, they have stuff that like actually happens every Thursday night. And I also, running into some of the holidays and projects coming up, I'm a little booked in weird ways too that I'm not usually. So just a warning to anyone that likes to hang out with me live here on IG every Thursday night at 7:30 p.m. There might be some abnormalities. So if you do want to hang out live, we'd love to have you. They will be posted on our social where you can see what night we're going to go live instead. But some of those Thursdays might be funky this month. So just a warning to you guys who like to hang out with us on here. Tonight is going to be a solo episode, and it may actually be quick because I have a pretty short little bullet list right here tonight. So it may actually be quick, but I just felt like I was feeling the topic this week, and I had a guest that I thought was going to be tonight, but then moved to next week instead, which is going to be a really cool guest, and I'm excited for them. So I wanted to do a solo episode because I've done some interviews too. So hopefully everyone, if you like metal and music and stuff, you liked episode 83 with Kalius. Tonight's going to be a short one so we can kind of get that space of like a pointed topic and things like that. So I have a friend, Pete Marston, shout out to you again, man, who was actually on episode 15. So if you haven't listened to that episode, go back. I encourage you to check out that one too, to hear his full story. But he is just a monster entrepreneur. He raised a 7-figure business in the HVAC industry, and then got into real estate and bought properties, and he partnered into another company. He sold something. He's just a monster entrepreneur. I respect the living shit out of him, and just an honestly good human being, which those two together is such a combo of someone being really good at the things that they do, but also just being a great human and never making you feel like you're not able to approach them despite some of the successes that they're having. So shout out Pete. Really like the things that he's doing lately. So for me, I had to pay attention to what he was doing lately because he really hasn't been on social a lot. Like I'm a noisy person. I'm every single week I'm on this podcast, and every single week I'm out there on social of like every different type talking to it. Pete has always been really quiet and not that vocal, and out of nowhere, Pete has traditionally been someone who is not that loud on social and really just humble to himself. He'll always help you out if you reach out to him, and I've reached out to him a ton. He's given me so much good advice in real estate and entrepreneurship and things like that. Great person, but he's always been pretty quiet. Recently, for the past 2 or 3 months, he has been actually posting, and that alone gave me some attention to it because I was like, this person, I never see them on social. And so I started reading them, and he started putting out posts like weekly, or I don't know if he's doing daily or whatever it is, but he's putting out posts like constantly right now, and they have all had a positive impact to me. So once again, shout out Pete. These posts, man, are doing me a favor. They're helping me out. I read them and I do get something from them every time, man. So thank you for doing that. So that long story aside, what spurred my conversation for tonight, that hopefully is just like a potent short point here, is one post he had particularly hit me because of kind of where my head's been at lately. And so he said, he basically talked about a post where his wife was, working with him, and they work together to communicate on the real estate stuff that they do. And there was a property that they really liked. They're like, huge potential in this. I love this property. It's going to be really cool, but it's really expensive. And his wife had just read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which we've said a bunch on this show. I encourage for anyone, whether you're in business or not, it's just a great mindset to have, I think. I really like that book. I read it early on, and it had an impact on me. But his wife read that book, and as soon as the book had ended, they ran into this deal. And that was like one of the first times he said that he had heard her say, "How can we afford this?" instead of "we can't afford this." Right? How can I do it instead of "we can't"? And there's way more to it than kind of the cheesy side to it. There's like a normal cheese to that of like, oh, okay, if you put your mind to it, you can do anything, like blah, blah, blah. Like, the difference is the two of them start off how you're going to face something. I can't do this is like a shutoff valve. Like, it immediately is stopping the conversation, stopping the thought, and it gives you the out to not even continue that thought or conversation at all. Because you just say, oh, we can't afford it. We can't do that. We can't live there. I could never do this thing. And it stops the conversation before people can even have it with you. Even if you are vocalizing it, which most of the time the I can't is in our head and we say it to ourselves, right? And we don't even let it get out into the air. When we say it out into the air and we say, I can't do this thing, and then you're having a conversation with people, it's like they don't want to offend you or go against it and stuff. And even that can stop the conversation of even them giving you ideas, because you're saying, I can't do this, is saying like, stop, like this isn't a path, essentially. And so the impact that I got, did you hear that voice crack? I am too old for that shit. I was singing a ton earlier, so that's why. I promise. But the reason why that had impact is because it was the first time Pete's prepping up, I'm sure. This is all me thinking this, so maybe this didn't happen at all. So bear with me here. I'm sure that Pete's planning, because he believes it, and he's like, we really have to do this thing. I'm sure he's planning for like, how do I, have a discussion with her to assure her that we can do it, and how do I get her on my team for this decision, and get her on board with this. And she said, how can we do this thing? So she wasn't saying we can do this. Like, she wasn't with confidence, like, yeah, whatever, like, we're fine, we can do whatever we want to do. She was never saying that. What she said is, I'm open to the conversation of how this thing could happen. And that's why it's important. And the thing that's hard about it is, it's not something that you even have the moment to cognitively use your intelligence and think about. It's a very built-in thing that's very hard to get rid of. But once it's like kind of cracked, and you just have like, how can I do this thing? How can I do this thing? And like, you're only thinking that as a starting point, then it's kind of there. And it's just like you catch yourself. It is a self-limiting belief is what it's called. I can't do this is I'm unable to do this thing. And in you telling yourself that from the get-go stops all action on it. Whereas how can I do this thing creates action. That's the difference. I can't do this stops action before it can ever take place. It negates action before you can even talk to someone. Even talking to someone about it, like, hey, how could we do this? That's an action in itself, because you don't know the answer, but you're willing to have the discussion. I can't do this is a negative or negating action, which stops all action from taking place. It says, whoa, hold on, shut this thing down, stop talking about this, stop thinking about this, it's not possible, stop. That's what I can't do this is saying. And doing is an action. It is some action, but it's actually an action of causing inaction, right? But how can we do this is, let's solve a problem. let's explore this, and I'm willing to entertain this idea for figuring this out. So when she's saying, how can we afford this? She's not saying, I have all the answers and I can do this, but she's saying, I'm open to the conversation. I would like to have this happen. How can it happen? The reason why that hit me so hard is because that is what directly led to my circumstances right now. Is I was constantly in studios with gear that I could never afford. And I was like, how? Like instead of being like, I could never have this studio. I could never own something like this. I could never make it full time off of this thing. I could never do this thing. Like, I can't do this. They can do it because of some other thing that I make up of like how they did it. Instead of saying, I can't do this thing, and here's why, I'm saying, how the hell did this person do that? How the hell can I do this? And when you start there, you don't know how it's going to happen. And you don't know if it's possible. Because, and I'm going to forewarn you right now, like, along with that, like, I don't want to like mislead you and have you be pumped up and like, oh, now that I say this, it can be, I'm not trying to bullshit you and say that that's possible. You could say, how can this happen? Then run through every idea in the book and legitimately be like, I've got nothing. Like, I think that it actually can't happen. You might end up in the same spot, but because you took the time to do that, you either validated it in truth, or you might find and outsource a way that someone else has an idea that you might not have to figure it out. But because I was trying to figure it out, it led to two things. I knew that I didn't know how anyone had done it. I was like, I don't know how they can afford it feasibly on the monthly. I don't know how they bought this equipment. I don't know how people can do it full time, how they start a funnel. Like, I didn't know. So two things happened. One is I reached out to people that did it, and I talked to people constantly that do the things that I want to do on the show. I talk to people. I mean, this is a great medium for me. I talk to people who know the answer, or they've already done something past what I've done. I want to know how it happened. So this is a great medium right here, podcasting. I've said that before, of I interview people because I want to learn shit. I want to know how they did stuff, right? So first of all, like, how can I do this thing will lead you to talk to people who have the answer. There's people that have done it. They have the answer and they did it somehow. So saying I can't do this because I can't afford it, because I can't move there, because I have a family, because I have whatever, because I have debt, because of whatever it is that we say, I can't do this. I can't do this because. They said, how can I? Because, right? How can I? And this is how. Someone's done it. So leading the conversation from me when I'm asking that to myself, how do I do it? How did this person do it? How can it happen? Leads me to people that may already have the answer. The other thing is it opens the door immediately to me finding the answer. I didn't plan for opening a studio as a home studio that had other income potential for the property that made it so that my overhead was wiped out and that I was making money on the property. I didn't plan on any of these things. I was just like, how in the hell in modern day? I don't have record labels that back me. I don't have an inheritance and crazy money. I don't have insane income. Like, how could I possibly do it? But because I'm saying, I'm not stopping the conversation to say there's no way that I can ever do it. I'm starting it right away saying, how can that happen? So now, because the very nature of me asking that and thinking that every single day makes me look at what is in my way as a way to solve it instead of a way that stops it. So they're the same conversation. It's just like, how am I going to start out here so that I'm directing the energy to take an action? When you say, I can't do it, you're saying I can't do it because of a roadblock, right? And that you probably have the roadblock straight up. Like, it probably is a thing that you need to think about, and it's not wrong to think about it, right? But how can I will identify the same roadblocks. But those roadblocks are now going to be you trying to figure out how you're going to maneuver and get around them. It's not you trying to figure out why you would be stopped by them. You're saying, okay, I can't do this. How can I afford this thing? Inside that same thing, you're saying, I can't afford this thing. How is that even possible? but then you're thinking about how can it happen? Like you're literally like, you're spitballing with yourself in a room. Like you're pitching ideas. Like how could it happen? Could I create an Airbnb out of extra space that I don't have to reduce my overhead and make money? Could I have my workplace be at the same place where I live so that way my overhead is the same, so I'm not paying a second thing, overextending myself? Could I, I can't afford this. Can I work a second job on the weekend? And like, what would that do for output for me? Would that pay off this debt? Would that save up for this thing, this piece of equipment that would get me to this point? How can I move to this place? Do I know someone already there that I can live with for 3 months and then find my way? Do I, whatever it is that you come up with, they're the same roadblocks identified, but you're starting a conversation instead of stopping it. And that will lead to you figuring out how it can happen. Like the mindset of it is how can I is always going to cause an action towards that goal. Whereas I can't is stopping all action right away. I know that I said that already in the podcast, but it's really important. And it's also something that, with these self-limiting beliefs, it's something that unfortunately stops others from helping us because we're so scared of the answer to it, of that we can't actually do the thing, and that it's like validated that you can't do it. Like someone's like, yeah, you can't afford that. And that can be a danger to it too, because if you talk to the wrong person, they may add to the issue of it, because you might have said, how can I do that? And they would be like, you can't afford it. Can't afford it. But it always needs to be a conversation of how can I, right? So even if someone else comes to you, say like you say, how can I? You're like, instead of not having the conversation with them, you're like, you're strong enough and you're like, how can I do this? And you say it to your spouse or your friend or whatever. You're like, hey, how can I do this thing? And maybe they say you can't do it. They're just like, you can't, man. Can't afford that. I challenge you to like literally push it and say how, yeah, but like I hear you. It sounds ridiculous, but like, how could that happen? Like who does stuff like that? Like, how does it happen? In the conversation, you will find pieces of someone, some idea, and it might sound absolutely crazy. Like some of the things that I'm doing here at this property, they like, now that I'm here, they feel crazy. They really feel crazy because they're weird, and it's a weird life. And if I tell people that don't know who I am, they're like, that's weird. Like it's actually weird shit sometimes that you come up with. But like, I would have never come up with this idea that's starting to work if I didn't ask how I could do something, and I just said I could never do that. If I said I could never do it, I would still be working for a studio, and that might be awesome, but it just wasn't what I wanted to do, and it probably wasn't going to give the income results that I needed and that I was looking for. And I think that, when I was talking about a lot of these episodes, I talked to Meg beforehand on the solo ones and kind of bounce ideas off of her of like, what does this concept mean to you? Like, what do you think? And she said another valid point. If you listen to not the last episode, but the one before it, at episode 82, we had her back on, my wife, Megan, to talk about her changes and like what that's like to pivot hard like that when you really went after your dream and it wasn't right for you. And one thing that she said on this conversation of how can I versus I can't was also sometimes it's going to redirect you into the right path. Like I was saying earlier, you might go through all this like practice, this exercise, let's call it an exercise. You might go through all that process of like, how can I do this thing? You talk to other people, find the people that are doing it, you run it through your head, and you're saying, how can this thing happen? And you might find out that it's just not for you. Like maybe you're like, how can I be, I don't know. Maybe you're like, how can I work in Beverly Hills for like in the movies or something, you know what I mean? But then like you start moving there or like stuff starts happening and you're like, I hate this. Like maybe you think about like, how can I do it? And like what is worth it for you. Like what is worth it isn't what it is. Like we talked to Sean Giovanni of the record shop down in Nashville, and he talked a lot about like everyone has a radar or like a scale of what they are willing to sacrifice for the other thing, and sometimes it's not worth it to some people. Like some people are a 10 where they're just like, I will literally die for this thing. Some people are 2 and they're probably not going to try at all. Some people are 5 where they're like really thinking about it. They might start. Some people are 7 where they're going for it, and they're just like they're in the middle of it, and they're like, this isn't worth it for me. It's not actually worth it. Like I would rather go backwards than go into this because of X amount of stuff that I have to do. And you will find that too by asking that question of how can I do something, right? You're going to start identifying ways that you could achieve something financially or with goals to get something, or like whatever it is that you're trying to do. When you're like, hey, how can we make this thing happen? You're going to start coming up with ideas. I have had, this is a strange idea where we're at here. We've had some strange living spaces in the meantime, and we've been doing like weird travel, and like shit's been weird, and it's been really weird for the past 2 or 3 years. And not everyone wants to deal with that. And for me, it's like, how can I do it? These are the things that I have to do that. And I'm willing to do that. But I found a way to start getting that done, and I'm pumped about it, and I'm willing to do it. And that's great. You might go through an exercise like that and be like, I want to do this thing. And then be like, how can I do this thing? Come up with a bunch of things, ways to get that to happen. Like they're all actually feasible plans now that you've created to get that done. But you may find that that's just not the right path. And you wouldn't have found that right path had you not given yourself the ability to think through and then create action to push yourself that way. Because ultimately, it doesn't even matter if you land at the goal or not. Obviously, like that's what you want. But the purpose of this statement of how can I do this versus I can't do it is that I believe it, at least, that like you should always be striving to take an action of some sort. One thing that a mentor of mine told me when I was studying business a long time ago, before I launched anything of my own or tried to do anything, was if you're growing your green, you're ripe. If you're ripe, you rot. If you're growing your green, if you're ripe, you rot. I think it's a quote from the founder of McDonald's, but I also think he stole it from someone else. So shame on me if I don't remember the original, and I apologize for that. But the purpose of that statement is just that if you're not creating action, then you're going backwards because there's so many other people and things and businesses that are creating action that will keep going forward past you. So by the very means of not taking action, you're going backwards if you're just staying still, which is tough because staying still is so much easier than going forward because there's not as much resistance, right? It's like you're in the middle of that bird flight going down south, right? You're the middle bird. It's just like easier to cruise there than it is to like try to find a new way or like lead that thing and take all that friction. When you're doing the new paths, it's like always friction, but you got to do them if you want to get to what you want to get to. And to get to what you want to get to, you have to start with how can I do this thing every single time? And it's not easy to do. But what I think that you should do if you don't feel like you're doing that is next time you say, I can't do something to a friend, to a spouse, or in your head, try really hard to associate that right away with how can I do it? And then think that and follow that. If you like as an exercise, if you feel like you aren't taking enough action out there to go after what you're doing, or if you feel like you're getting distracted from other people, or like you're not creating ways to get to what you're trying to do, you're just there. You know what I mean? Like I know exactly how it feels. Like you're just there. If you feel that, I really challenge you the next time that you're in a position where you're trying to figure out how you could do something that you want to do and you stop and say, I can't do it. Or you say, I can't do that to someone else looking for validation of your self-limiting belief. Say, how can I do that? Follow that and think about it. Come up with ways you can legit do it and then taste test it. Try it. See what happens. So and rant. It always feels like a rant when it's a solo episode because it's just me. So like by the very nature of it, it is a rant because I have to talk for 15 to 30 minutes by myself. And it's weird if I don't talk. So like it feels ranty as shit when I do these episodes. But hopefully to you, it doesn't feel ranty because it's just a solo episode and it's just to get like a potent point. Look at that alliteration of, it's just to get that point of something that we may not be able to break down as much with guests because we're going so much through a story of something that's hot and heavy on my mind that either I learned or I'm feeling like, inspired by. So hopefully this is helpful to you. This is all we have for this episode. Next episode, I believe, is going to be on Tuesday night when this podcast as a podcast launches. So if you're listening to this right now, I think I'm going to be live tonight, but I will let you know on social with Vina's Fish Shop in Portland, Maine. So for those of you that don't know, I moved to Portland. Well, not Portland. Not that cool. I moved to Gray, Maine, right outside of Portland, about 20 minutes out. And that's where I'm working on my studio and things like that. And so people in the past, listening through the podcast in the earlier stages, you'll probably hear a lot of New Hampshire businesses and artists. You're probably going to see it a lot now out of the Portland scene. And reason being is because I run into people or businesses that I either admire or I think that they've got the right idea or I want to figure out something about them. Like I'm trying to figure it out. Like a lot of guests on here, I'm trying to figure out what it is that's happening or how they did a thing. And that's why I invite them on because I'm like, how did this thing happen? I'm just inquisitive and I want to know, So you're going to start seeing a lot of Portland businesses on here, a lot of Maine businesses and artists and entrepreneurs and creatives on here. I think I've got legit 3 booked that are all from, Portland, and then right here in Gray, which is spicy. So yeah, there are going to be a lot of Maine people on here for all you Mainers out there that are listening. I'm one of you now. So, you get more of my love. All right. But Granite Staters, I didn't forget about you and everyone else that's listening out there. I can see you on my little grid thing that shows me where people are at, where they're listening at. I see you in California, in Texas, in Michigan, in Arizona, in North Carolina, in like Australia and Europe and like all these crazy places. I'm sorry if I forgot you, but I appreciate all of you for listening. I appreciate that you find that this might be relevant or helpful to you. If you are doing something creative, I want to know what you're doing. I please DM me right on here. I talk to people constantly on here. I meet a ton of awesome people and bring some people on. If you want to talk to me about how can I versus I can't, send me a DM on here or head on over to wakingupfromwork.com. Shoot me an email. Check out the show notes, whatever it is. But let us know what you're working on. Let us know if any of this stuff is helping you, and have an awesome week. Go do something. Go figure out how you can do something, then do something about it. Don't tell yourself that you can't, because you can.